Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next in our series about financial readiness and being financially smart as you're getting ready to transition, whether that means retiring or separating out of active duty military life and into the civilian world. I have my favorite person to talk finances with, Sarah Roeder, here with me. Sarah is with AFMA. And one thing I really always like to point out is Sarah loves talking about finances. Like she calls it one of her favorite things to do. I like to go to the spa. Sarah likes to talk about finances.
It's true. I do. And I'm really excited to talk with you today, Anna, about life insurance and about SBP. These are really big decisions that happen when you're transitioning from the service, when you're retiring from the service. And so I'm excited to tell you about it today.
We always start our series live streams with a disclosure disclaimer. Talk us through it, Sarah. If they haven't heard it before, they're going to hear it today.
We are here today to do education. I'm Sarah Roeder. I'm the Director of Partnership and Member Engagement for AFMA. I'm a certified financial educator instructor. But we are not here to give legal advice or tax advice. We leave all that to the lawyers and the CPAs.
We're not a lawyer or a CPA, so please do not consider what we're talking about today to be the end all be all. It's really about starting conversations. And that's what all of these financial series are really about, is making sure you even know what questions there are to ask in order to make the smart decisions. Life insurance and survivor benefit plan, SBP, are two of the biggest questions. When you go to any transition Facebook page or group or conversation, and this is going to come up and be part of the questions that people are asking. We're going to start with life insurance.
If you've heard Anna and I talk before, I always talk about you have to have the foundation of understanding in order to make that right decision. And so when we talk about life insurance, it is something that AFMA does, and it is something that we have been doing since 1879. Our foundation is making sure that service members and their spouses are protected, right? Should something happen to them, how are bills paid, what happened? And a lot of times our service members will call and they'll ask questions. And one of the things they don't realize is that they're losing SGLI, which means when you've been on active duty, you have paid a very small amount for SGLI. Your spouse is even covered under SGLI, and that all goes away. And you have to make a decision. And so you've got to educate yourself on what that decision is.
We're going to start with just talking about what the basics of what is life insurance. We really are starting at 101, life insurance 101.
There you go, the foundations, right? And as a military spouse, it's really important to understand what life insurance is and how it can help you and your family. It's also really important to make sure that as a military spouse, you are thinking of life insurance for yourself. A lot of times we think of just the service member, but think of all of the things that would happen should you pass away. And so let's start at the foundation, because I love having a good foundational base before we talk about other things. Life insurance is to say, I want to cover those final expenses. Should something happen to me, what happens to my family, and how do they live without the income that I'm bringing in or without the services that I am providing? Say maybe a stay-at-home spouse, right? So think of it in a lot of different ways. When we talk about the basics of life insurance, there is term and there's full life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one is for a finite amount of time and one is forever, indefinitely. And your coverage changes. And so this is where it's really beneficial to talk to somebody who understands this, because your coverage is dependent on your age and your expenses. So how old are you and what are the expenses that you're needing to cover now, but also in the future? And then the cost of that, when you figure out how do they come up with these numbers? How are they telling me that I got to pay this? It's based off of your age and your health. Pretty simple. And so that kind of gives you a good foundational base of, I now know a little bit more to ask the right question.
Let's jump right into the two different types of life insurance and just talk a little bit more about what those are and what they look like.
Yeah. So you've had SGLI while you've been in the military, and that's a term life insurance. The term of that is you leave the service, you lose the SGLI. Most term life insurances are 30 years. That's typical. There's 15, there's different varied, but that's very typical. Term life insurance is meant to cover kind of those high earning years. So when you have little kids, when you have childcare costs, education costs, you've got mortgages. If you were to lose your income, that there would be people depending on you to buy groceries. This is our term life insurance. Our whole life insurance says when I am 70, 80, 90, 100 years old and I pass away, what do I want to leave to the next generation? And so those coverages can be used for long-term care settlement options, which is important to understand. So you need nursing home care. They can be converted into payments for those. They actually have a cash value built into them. So you actually are earning a cash value back. And so that's the basic difference between our term and our whole life. And it's important to know that one size does not fit all. Some people like a combination of both. Some people like one over the other. But you should understand what both of them are and then ask questions to what fits for you and your family.
Now, when we get out of, we service members and spouses, they get out of the service, and talking about transition here, and I'm having a hard time just saying the word transition for some reason.
Yeah, we're leaving the military.
We're leaving the military. Now, there is SGLI can be changed into VGLI, right? And this is an option provided through the VA. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it is. So this is really important. VGLI is important. It's important to understand. It's also important that the number one thing that we see with transitioning service members is they simply sign a piece of paper that says, yeah, I'll just transfer my SGLI to VGLI without understanding what that means and what that means financially for you and your family. VGLI was created in saying we understand that our service members might have been put into situations that the civilian world hasn't. And because of that, they don't qualify for any type of civilian life insurance policy. So VGLI is for those who have really severe medical condition. And because of that, there's no underwriting. Any service member can get it. It becomes very expensive, like very expensive. You can see on this table. In the short term, people don't think about it and they just sign it over and they're like, oh, $80 or $100 or whatever. But what you're not realizing is that it gets so expensive. So it's really important to understand that, yes, this might be right for you and your family if you meet certain medical criteria. But if not, if you're a relatively healthy person, you should be asking questions. You should be calling and you should be finding out what other premiums are. To give you a comparison, you can see on this chart here, we have the cost of VGLI. These are AFMA's rates, and you can see they are a lot less expensive, as well as when you lock in your life insurance rate, that's your rate for the time in which that period is. So if it's a term or whole life, that's your rate. VGLI increases a lot as you get older. So understand this. And for military spouses, I think it's really important to understand when your service member is given that piece of paper that they should just take a pause and think about that before they sign it.
When your service member is active duty, it's likely that you are also covered under their SGLI insurance policy. You have a policy that falls under their active duty status. So you are also losing that, right?
Then
can a spouse use VGLI or do they have to go out on the economy?
You've got to go out on the economy. If you don't see an LES, you would never know that you're paying a very small amount for $100,000 for your spouse to be covered. And so now that coverage is gone and you need to replace that. And maybe you need more or maybe you need less. It's just good to know that you are going to be losing that.
When we're talking, and this again is educating spouses on that life insurance thing, because you're having to now start to document all those aches and pains, whether they're visible or invisible aches and pains that have happened to your service member. We start to get stressed out because that underwriting process is now going to want to see what those are and know what their risk is going to be if they accept you for life insurance. So that VA documentation timeframe and that VA rating becomes really important. So we're going to dive into that for just a minute and talk about how those two things play off of each other. And Sarah's going to tell you all about it.
VA ratings are really important. I used to work within our VA department here at AFMA a long time ago. And one of the most common things, and we still hear today of service members, is they say things like, I'm not as worse off as so-and-so, or I'm going to save the benefit for somebody else. know that your service member should be doing a VA rating. It is important. It is a benefit of their service and an entitlement to them. And by the way, they aren't saving anyone any money. The money has been allocated, whether they spend it or not.
Yeah.
So it's something that you should absolutely encourage your service member to do. When you talk about doing your VA disability rating, it's always a really great idea to go ahead and figure out your life insurance before you start this process. Go ahead, figure it out, sign up, get your medical underwriting done, establish your life insurance policy, and check that box off, and then move on to your VA rating. And when we talk financially about what this will do, is this has a lot of financial implications. VA compensation comes to you and your family tax-free. There are also benefits at the state level for various percentages of disability. There can also be for higher education for children based off of VA disability. So there's a lot of monetary value associated to this benefit that has been earned. One of the things we also think about, because we're talking about life insurance, which means we're talking about what happens when someone passes away, is just like your military retired pay stops, your VA compensation stops. And then unless you're service connected for something that is caused a death, then your spouse is not eligible to put forward a claim to get some money back. And that's what we talk about at DIC. And so there's a lot of important things wrapped up in that VA rating financially, as well as timing wise when you want to do that.
This is, again, all of the things that you as a spouse really need to be aware of. And what Sarah said is really true about encouraging your service member to get their VA rating done. Their buddy that's worse off than they are is not going to get extra money if they choose not to get their VA rating and choose not to take that disability payment. So there is no benefit to not doing it for the service member. It's just a loss of income, another income that they have earned, that service member has earned as part of their military service. So really love to emphasize that, just so every spouse out there understands why it's so important to encourage them, even when they struggle through that. It's part of the retirement process. It is a stinky, sucky part of the retirement process. I will say the service member does not like it one bit, and they feel like they're a malingerer or a whiner or whatever, that imposter syndrome of I'm not that hurt that comes to play. And I've done a couple of different shows on that and conversations about that. So if that's the case, reach out. We do have support systems where there are people that they can talk to about that specifically. All right. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare, TRICARE for retirees, because this also is going to have an effect on, your life insurance and all of that kind of good stuff.
Yep. So TRICARE is important. We've talked about it almost in every iteration of this segment. It's important because a lot of times the service member doesn't understand that you will lose your TRICARE. So if you're retiring, you get to keep it, but it's different, right? You have to re-enroll in it. You have to establish new care. You have to pay for it. And if you are separating from service, you and your family will not have this benefit. You will not have TRICARE. It's also why, if you're separating from service, doing a VA disability claim is so important, because your health care for your conditions that are service connected will be provided through the VA. So that is incredibly important. But when we talk about TRICARE for retiree, we talk about it in two options, right? You get to make a decision now. Congratulations, you get to actually make decisions about your life. How great is that? You can say, I'm good with the TRICARE I've been getting, which is TRICARE Prime. Or you can say, you know what? We're moving to a different state, a different location. I'm not near a military installation. I want more options. I don't want to have to wait for referrals, and TRICARE Select might be right for you. And it's important to go to the TRICARE website. They have a wonderful website where they outline all of the costs. They do change. So make sure that you look at that and make sure that you start thinking about budgeting for that, right? Because we're talking about how all of this plays into your ultimate finances and the basis of how you are going to live outside of the military.
When you're looking at that life insurance and your service members getting their VA rating and that service connection is also going to play a big part in who is using that TRICARE benefit. Just you as the military spouse, and possibly your children, and your service member wants to go to the VA. Just keep in mind that look different. And then the older they get, that TRICARE turns into Medicare, and there's all sorts of things that start happening. So you really do need to know what's going on with your health insurance as part of that overall look of your life benefits and caring for yourself in that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So guess where we're at? SBP, Survivor Benefit Plan. Okay. Now, the big question everyone always wants to know is, let's start with, first of all, what is it? And then like pros and cons, because even though we don't want to say pros and cons, there really are pros and cons. And it's going to depend on your family as to whether or not Survivor Benefit Plan makes sense for you.
Yeah. And this is one of the biggest questions that we get. And the question is, should I elect Survivor Benefit Plan? And the answer is, I don't know, but I can tell you what it is. And I can tell you things to ask and things to sit down with your spouse with and to think through so that you can make the right decision for that. And we all know that I love a good foundation. So what is Survivor Benefit Plan? Survivor Benefit Plan is saying that should the retiree pass away and they have said, okay, I'm going to pay 6.5% of my military retired pay every month so that when I pass away, 55% of that military retired pay will go to my surviving spouse. That's the basics of it. And that's important because sometimes people don't realize the military retired pay is just for the retiree. When that retiree passes away, that's it. It stops. Just like VA compensation is just for that veteran. When the veteran passes away, it stops. Nothing is afforded to the spouse unless provisions have been made. And for DFAS and for retired pay, that provision is Survivor Benefit Plan. When you look at that, some of the things that we say, hey, these are some real pluses when you talk about Survivor Benefit Plan, is that it's COLA adjusted. That's great because it's government subsidized. It is paid with pre-tax dollars. So you get a bit of a tax break on your DFAS statement. You'll see that. That's really great. There's no evidence of insurability, right? So we're talking about life insurance earlier, and you were saying, okay, the cost of your life insurance or your insurability is based off of your age and your health. This isn't the case here. So there's no evidence of that. When you have paid for 30 years, they say, congratulations, you're paid up. And the spouse's age is not considered from the factor of a spouse at any age can get this benefit once the service member has passed away. When we take a little step back and think, okay, what are some things that might not be so great or that I should consider in this Survivor Benefit Plan is if your spouse passes away before you, there's no return on investment. It's not like a life insurance where you can designate any beneficiary you want, or you could leave it to an estate or anything like that. It is just no return on your investments for your spouse. There's no cash value to it. So we talked about whole life insurance and how there's a cash value that builds in there. Not the case here. The benefits are taxable. So when somebody receives a life insurance payment, that comes to them and there's no taxes on that. But this is paid monthly to the spouse and it is a taxable event. There's no residuals to an estate, right? I can't leave it to my estate. And if your spouse remarries before they're 55 years old and they've been collecting this benefit, that stops. And it's a pretty permanent choice. So it's a big decision. It's a very big decision, so much so that they say that not only the service member, but the spouse has to sign off on this. So both of you have to be in agreement of, am I going to take this SBP or am I not going to take this SBP? And that's really important.
It's really important that the spouse knows that. I mean, it's not just sign off on it. You have to have a notarized. If you choose to not take SBP, it has to be a notarized document.
Yeah,
it goes in as part of your service member's retirement paperwork. So this is truly a time to sit down and say, is this right for us? Is this something that we need? Do you, as the spouse, need this security blanket to feel comfortable moving forward into those transition timeframe years? And so there's lots of things that Sarah's thrown out here today. There's more conversations that need to be had. This actuary defense link that I have here on this slide that will also be in the show notes is a great way to go and just work some numbers out and take a look at what that's going to really look like financially for you and your family if you do elect to take SBP.
We can look at what that looks like financially, because a lot of times they'll say, how much is it? And what does it mean? And it's like, we can tell you that. Part of AFMA, it's of being a member of AFMA is that our member benefits team can give you real numbers to this based off of your income and can say, this is what it'll look like for your family. And that can be a huge benefit as well.
Yeah, I really love this slide because it really outlines, again, some of those things that might be a real benefit to you and some of those things that are maybe not as important to other families. But when you're looking at your options here, you can start to see where things line up. Now, there's a lot of people that do both SBP and life insurance, and they do both of those options, and that's totally fine. There's a lot that have said SBP wasn't for us and opted out of it. Again, this is such a one-on-one. You and your spouse really need to sit down and say, hey, what does our health look like? What do our needs look like? Do we have young children that might need to be taken care of? Or are we empty nesters that just plan on traveling on cruise ships for the rest of our life, right?
And so those are all super important things to talk about. And we can look through these numbers and we can see that. So to give you a better understanding too, is making sure that you're thinking about, okay, what does my 30-year look like? That's a good trajectory. Because when you talk about your life insurance and people say, okay, I'm gonna get a term life insurance to cover me for 30 years. And we say, okay, we can show you what that looks like. If you get $800,000 and you're about 45 years old and you're in pretty good health, based off of your survivor benefit plan, that would last approximately 20 years for your survivor before they would, quote unquote, run out, right? If they were to take the same amount as your SBP. And so you have to think, what does that look like in 20 years for my spouse? Are they drawing Social Security and have required minimum distributions? And do they have this huge influx of cash and maybe they don't need? I don't know, right? And so it's important to think about not just now, but what it looks like 20 or 30 years down the road. And same thing with SBP. A lot of times that is a big comfort, is the peace of mind. You shouldn't discredit your peace of mind of how well you sleep at night.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that information today about life insurance and SBP and what those considerations need to be. I feel like if this is the first foray into kind of understanding that, you did a really good job of setting that foundation, saying, oh, these are things I need to have. This is information I need to know in order to even make a decision. Right? Yeah. You really do have to really sit down and start working through those numbers in order to be able to say, I am comfortable and confident with what my choice is. One of the worst things I hear as someone who works so much with military spouses that are in transition or after transition is, I didn't know and now I regret, right? I didn't know that. I didn't know that was even a consideration. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know it was an option. It just breaks my heart a little bit. Listen, I've been there, done that, right? Like prior to retirement, do you think that I knew everything? No, it was the crashing, burning retirement experience I had that led me to even create MilSpouse Transition and say, there's a better way. We've got to start putting resources together so spouses know where they stand, so spouses know what their options are, and understand the process that the service member is going through to the best of their ability so that they can help make those good choices for the family as a whole. Okay, I'll off my soapbox now.
No, I love your soapbox. It's great. It's all very important information. And sometimes it's just really nice to hear somebody say it's okay to not know, and here's a place to educate yourself, and here's a place to call, or here's a resource that is not going to judge you or think, why don't you know that, or anything like that. It's sometimes really nice to hear that, that it's okay. And it's even really important to start that process to educate yourself. So
yeah, absolutely. So jump into the show notes. We're going to drop some links in there, including how you can find Sarah right here. Look at her. But this is at the Military Influencer Conference. This was just one of my favorite shots of all those faces.
We got it. It was definitely indeed a great day. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's a great way to find me is through LinkedIn. Our AFMA financial readiness page, which is listed here, and I know will also be in the show notes, is a wonderful resource to be able to click into and see where you currently are, things you should be thinking about, and then where you're going to be maybe in the next 2 years, year, 6 months. So I would highly encourage anyone to check out that page. It's very helpful. And then, of course, our member benefits here at AFMA is here to answer questions, is here to give guidance. It's something that we are very prideful in.
So yes. So if you are a member at AFMA, all you have to do is make a really quick phone call, right? And if
Yep.
you are interested in the offerings, the services and offerings that AFMA has, be sure to reach out. Sarah can direct you, or that our benefits team can as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here with me for yet another conversation about finances and being smart, SBP life insurance. I know that was a huge decision for our family. Thank you for just sharing that knowledge. I think it's, again, like you said, it's nice for a military spouse to say, oh, I didn't realize that was how that worked. And to not feel like they're the only one in the world that didn't realize it. I promise you, you are not. So continue to join us at more Milspouse Transition Conversations. You're going to see Sarah in and out, down, all around. She's always constantly there. And Sarah does also her own live streams pretty regularly about different things of importance for the military community. So make sure you go and follow her on LinkedIn. All right, everyone, we are going to sign out now and say thank you for joining us here today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Milspouse Transition Conversation. Talk to you later.